Thelb Karu by Conway Fitzgerald. Part 5. Death of a King. Birth of a Cloak. Thelb watched Usue quietly until she fell to sleep on the couch across the room from him. Not long after, he also fell asleep, leaning back awkwardly in the cushioned chair he had chosen the night previous. He was very tired, so he slept soundly. Thelb dreamt of days long past, when he and Usue were classmates at the Mirdet School for Higher Learning. Thelb had forgotten completely how truly fun those days were, how innocent was every youthful thought they had. The only real fear Thelb could remember having was whether Usue shared his feelings of doting admiration. He relived all the shy adolescent nerves, pondering silently whether he could find the courage to speak up and share his feelings with her. Now, within this pleasant dream, he could look upon her beautiful face once again with an adoring smile. She was free to smile back at him and challenge his bold assertions about any subject matter they debated. But then, Thelb's pleasant dream was interrupted. He heard a long, moaning cry, which did not belong in that classroom. It was the groaning sob of an adolescent child, and it was getting closer. Thelb opened his eyes and realized it was Arthurham. He had come out from the bedchamber in the middle of the night, holding his stomach. The young heir had a frightened look of anguish on his face as his moan became louder and his breathing more labored. He shuffled his feet feebly to get closer to his promised bride. Usue was then also awakened and looked to the young heir with much concern.
Arthurham, what is wrong?
She said as she sat up. As she did, her hands reached down to her own stomach, which was riddled with intense pain. Arthurham then coughed out. His cough sprayed liquid about the room. At first, it appeared he had vomited all over the large heaney flower bouquet offering they had brought with them from the Mirdet. Usue glanced down to the large flower arrangement and saw many of the pretty flower petals were now spattered with blood.
Arthurham!
She exclaimed as the boy reached out to her for a desperate embrace. Arthurham then coughed again. Then he gagged. This time he puked up a huge glob of blood all over Usue's beautiful white gown, the same one she was still wearing from the night previous.
Thelb, something's wrong. Find a healer,
she screamed. Thelb hesitated. Arthurham's head was now buried in Usue's lap. He was no longer sobbing, but gasping for air. He appeared to be drowning in his own blood. He was dying. Despite the many years Thelb had spent studying healing and magic at the Artemesh Doa, he was forbidden from using any of those skills as a member of the Bidan Taut. Forgotten medicinal formulas and ancient arcane practices raced through his startled mind, but to no avail. He would be forced to rely solely on his martial skills. Usue was right. The Zet royals needed a healer right away. Yet leaving the side of his charge defied his instincts. That notion felt terribly wrong as well. He needed to summon a runner from the keep's guard, or one of their small staff of servants.
Hurry! Find help!
Cried out Usue, holding young Arthurham's head in one hand, her own stomach in the other. Earlier that night, in the furthest room of an adjacent wing, where the liberated Drow twins Shaela and Rumdrill were accommodated, their prized refugee, Philistre, had invited another powerful and beautiful Drow priestess into her room. She emerged from the magic dimension portal with ever more of her deadly minions. It was Kaylee Zestiri, the leader of the house that bore her name. She greeted Philistre with a wicked smile.
Well done, Philistre,
said Kaylee, inspecting the captured Drow twins.
Take these traders back to the Doiki, where they belong,
she commanded.
This one feels the pain of the Demertils. It appears she has weakened in the Overlands. She will share the fate of her woodland compatriots and drown in her own blood.
Said Dalish, laughing. Dalish was Kayleigh's brother and leader of her personal guard. Shayela was bound, but still displaying intense discomfort in her abdomen, a symptom of the presence of ingested Demertil larvae that were reproducing quickly. He was surprised to see the parasite having such a strong effect on the digestive tract of another drow elf. Most healthy dark elves were immune to these ravenous intestinal bloodworms.
She may pretend she is not, but she is of the Doiki. She will survive,
said Kayleigh with certainty.
Return her now, where she belongs, in service to her high priestess and her true goddess, Zaxtet.
She closed in on Shayela's suffering face.
We will teach her to be happy in service and in darkness. She will learn the error of her ways.
Both Rumdrel and Shayela cried in anguish as they were dragged back through the dimension portal to a cavern several hundred feet beneath the ground. There, the Dark Elves had carved out a subterranean cavern which led many miles back down beneath, to the Underdark, to the realm of the Doiki. The twins believed they had escaped that pit forever. Kayleigh then arranged her warriors and assassins into specified attack squads. Nearly 60 armored drow now filled that small chamber, and dozens more had already been dispatched throughout the keep of Karak.
You know your assignments. Kill the enemy and hold fast your positions. Do not break from your area unless I command it so. Find your targets. Kill them all. No survivors,
she commanded. Thelb exited the front chamber doorway itself quite precariously, as if drunk or still asleep and dreaming. His mind was dizzy with indecision. Where to go first, and to whom? The Grey Mages had left. The Druids were miles away. The Zet servants could never find their way to and from the Great Druid's Hall, especially in the darkness. Thelb needed to find Dugulwyn. Thelb had left the Zet quarters in such confused haste that he was without his broadsword. It lay idly beside his cushioned chair. Thelb reached for his empty scabbard as he observed another shifting shadow leaping at him from a hidden area in the hallway. It was a male dark elf warrior assassin bearing down on him with its short sword. Thelb's instincts as a beat-on tout took over. He could not parry the weapon, so instead he shifted into the attacker and grabbed his sword-bearing arm. As the sword impacted his exposed chest, Thelb thrust his elbow into the assassin's neck. He then wrested the sword from the drow elf's grasp. Thelb spun and slashed down another attacker behind him, wielding 2 daggers. Thelb charged and then blocked a third attacker. He dodged his stabbing attacks easily and then slashed his legs. The third attacker dropped down in pain as Thelb closed in for a neck-piercing kill shot. The primary assassin removed his hand from his bruised neck and then pulled his sidearm from his boot sheath. Before Thelb could close in and finish him, a series of mini crossbow bolts were fired at him. Thelb dodged most of the missiles by recessing deftly into the stone wall. But as they continued to fire, more than one impacted his armorless body. Thelb attacked angrily. He rolled into the squad of drow who had fired the mini-bolts. The drow struck at him with their spiked buckler shields with fearless determination, like they knew exactly who he was, like he was their mark. They were stationed outside the Zet door specifically for this attack, like they had been planning this very moment for many years. But the drow did not anticipate Theb's true prowess or ferocity. Thelb exchanged shots with the assassins with zealous violence, cutting down the kill squad, one after the other. Thelb then made his way down the hallway to where the closest Wood Elf guards were stationed. There he found only their bloodied bodies. They had likely been dead for hours now. It was unlikely any druids or healers were available or nearby. If they were, they would likely have shared the same fate. It was then Thelb realized he had lost track of the first assassin he encountered. That dark elf had retreated before he could finish him. If these assassins were there for him, they were likely ordered to attack the Zet house itself. Thelb raced back to the Zet chambers. He thrust his way through the doorway and was struck immediately after by the waiting dagger of the drow assassin. The dark elf killer stuck Thelb in the side, but Thelb did not fall. Once again, like an angry berserker, Thelb turned into the assassin and tackled him to the ground. Theb's hands then covered the attacker's face. He thrust his fingers violently into the drow's eye sockets while jamming his thumbs into his mouth. As the drow assassin bit down angrily on his thumbs, Thelb smashed his skull into the stone floor until he was dead. Theb's hands were now covered in drow blood and saliva. He pulled 2 poison darts from his leg and hip. He was already feeling the noxious effects of the viraf, a drow sleep poison. Thelb returned to Usue and to check on the boy. They were both lying on the couch, bathed in blood and motionless.
Usue, are you hurt?
Thelb called out, trembling, inspecting her for wounds. Usue was still alive. She held Arthurham in her arms. Her lovely white dress was now soaked in the boy's coughed-up blood. She looked up to Thelb with a shocked grimace of pain. Then she smiled as she recognized him.
Thelb Karu,
she said with surprise, as her consciousness drifted and her long life faded from her eyes.
I wore your face.
She finally allowed herself to tell him. She then exhaled her last breath and returned to her death embrace with the young J.R.R. They were both gone. There was nothing Thelb could do. Thelb stood up trembling. Everything that had given him a renewed sense of family and purpose was now lost, wholly and entirely. His life had become forfeit. He had failed his mission and not seen to the boy's protection. The object of his affection, his one and only love, Usue Voltir, was also gone. Thelb reached for his broadsword with only one thought prevailing his mind. The great druid Puale must pay for this. He must die today.
What is this dark magic?
Exclaimed the great druid.
Everything I do to heal her only harms her more.
He cried out to his most trusted druidic followers. Puale had just attempted another powerful healing ritual on Terra Kalin to stop her internal bleeding. His powerful healing rites repaired her intestines for a moment, only to have her insides attacked again by a larger and more numerous hidden attacker.
"Let me try again,"
said Gareth.
"Perhaps we just need to be persistent to clear the ailment."
Said Terra Kalin. She coughed, and more blood leaked down the sides of her beautiful face. She motioned for Puale to come closer so she could speak into his ear. All of the druids were silent as Puale held his beloved queen-to-be in his arms. He moved his ear closer to her whispering mouth so he could hear her last words.
They wanted to stop the Kayadura, to prevent the coming restorer.
She labored to say. She coughed again.
I know, my love. That is why you must survive this. You must hold on.
Puale begged of her.
I am not.
She said, shaking her head slightly as she grunted and gasped for more breath.
I am not the one. You must.
She stopped as her mouth filled with blood again. Puale used the last of his healing powers to repair her body long enough to hear her voice one last time.
Puale, you must carry on. You must find a child of the Ostrapa. Fulfill the promise.
She said. She then lurched in pain as the Damertils recommenced their feast on her body from within. She cried out in pain. Puale held her beautiful face in his hands. The greatest healer in the world was powerless to save his own beloved queen-to-be. She cleared her mouth of blood and spoke again.
You must, my love, for the Ire debt, for me.
She said. She lurched again and cried out in great pain. Then her eyes closed and she could breathe no longer. Puale called out in great sorrow. The entirety of the Whispering Wood cried aloud with them. It was then the doors to his chambers burst open. It was Dugalwyn and a few of his best fighters. They were bloodied from combat, and their faces bespoke the shocking nature of a surprise attack.
My lord,
He said.
we are under attack. We are overrun.
Dugalwyn exclaimed.
Who dares?
Said Puale.
It is the mayors of Doiki, the Drow. They are here, in Telsuma. How?
Asked the great druid. Before anyone could answer their king, the Drow kill team had reached the inner sanctum of the great druid's hall. Dugalwyn's remaining fighters slammed shut the large wooden door in a vain attempt to hold the attackers at bay. Dugalwyn then rushed towards his king and highest religious leader.
My king, we need to get you out of here. You must return to the forest.
Dugalwyn demanded. His best military commander was right. If there was to be any hope of his survival, he would need to retreat to the Ire Det immediately. But as Puale was retreated up the stairs, through his bedchamber, and over to his exterior tower, he could not bring himself to take his owl form. He could not fly away from Telsuma. He had become enraged by this attack, and now only wanted revenge. He re-entered his bedchamber and reached for the ancient scimitar of sharpness, the prized ancient weapon of Telsuma. Its possession was the key to the claim of Great Druid. Today, he would use it until his vengeance was satisfied.
Here, I will stand my ground. If they want my life, let them come and take it from me,
commanded Puale to Gareth and Dugalwyn. The Dark Elves created another dimension portal just beyond the doorway where the Wood Elven warriors had created their small shield wall. The Drow killers then passed through the dimension portal and then flanked them and dispatched the Woodland Guardians from behind. The doors were then thrust wide open, and Kaylee Zastiri entered the Great Druid's inner sanctum with a broad smile.
Onward, my Valreds. Kill them all.
She commanded. Her vicious Drow kill team charged ahead, running wildly up the stairs and past the curtains which led to the Great Druid's bedchamber. Kaylee was eager to join them until she noticed the motionless body of Tia Aermine in the adjacent living room. She was laying there alone, bloodied and motionless. Kaylee walked slowly towards the slain woodland princess, drawing 2 daggers and blood-drawing pouches to perform a ritual bloodletting for her spider goddess. She climbed atop Tia Aermine's body, straddling her hips. Kaylee was chanting in the language of the Doiki as she thrust the 2 daggers into the woodland elf's chest, drawing the queen-to-be's immortality from her body and into her waiting pouches. Thelb witnessed the entire ritualistic act. He had followed some of the advancing drow secretly into the great druid's hall. Then he saw the dimension portal, and he passed through it. On the other side of the magic portal, he found himself alone with Kaylee's Zastiri in a shadowy corner of the living room. Thelb was clouded by the Viraf poison, but disciplined enough to keep himself awake and focused for battle. This drow priestess, he deduced, was likely the culprit behind this entire attack. Thelb emerged from the shadows undetected by Kaylee. As she reached over to place her prize extracted blood into her satchel, she had exposed her back to him. Thelb did not hesitate. He charged stealthily and then thrust his broadsword into her back, piercing it through her, missing her heart by a fraction of an inch. But Kaylee reacted quickly, displaying remarkable strength and tolerance for pain. She flexed her body around completely to grab hold of Thelb's arms. He could not force himself off her. He could not pull his broadsword away. This drow priestess was the most beautiful elven female he would ever see in his long life. Her breathtaking, immaculate beauty was abstracted by her intense expression of masochistic pleasure. This frightened Thelb, unlike anything he had ever experienced. She smiled at him provocatively and groaned intensely at the wound he inflicted. She moaned sexually, like the sword itself was his missing phallus, and she was enjoying his entry immensely. This most unexpected reaction caused Thelb's grip on her arms to loosen, slightly enough to allow Kaylee to strike him with a vicious backhanded punch. Thelb held on to his broadsword as it was pulled from her body. Thelb fell several steps away. Kaylee then felt her own torn abdomen as her blood poured onto the floor, her first acknowledgement of the intense pain of the wound. She then spoke prepared magic words and teleported herself away. Up the staircase, and in the large bedchamber beyond, Thelb could hear a grueling battle ensue. He could hear the growling of a giant wolf, the striking and cutting of angry swords, and the agony-filled cries of the dying. He made his way up the staircase slowly, methodically. He did not wish to join either side of this battle. He simply wanted to have an opportunity to be there when it all ended. Thelb's intent was certain: to finish Pule and avenge his sovereign's losses, as well as his own. When Thelb reached the summit of the stone staircase, he pulled back to the wall. 2 drow males were retreating back towards the portal, defying the orders of their priestess. An enormous white wolf leapt off the staircase after them. Its jaws dug into the legs of a fleeing male fighter. The other did not offer him any help, choosing instead to continue to flee. But that last treacherous drow male then realized the dimension portal was gone. There would be no escape for him. The large white wolf closed in for the kill. Thelb used this opportunity to enter Puale's bedchamber. He approached slowly, cautiously. Strewn about the room were the bodies and parts of the Drow kill team. Dugulwyn and the last of his guard were also down. Thelb moved closer towards the exterior tower beyond the bedchamber. There, in the center of the balcony, he found the bloodied body of Puale. Thelb stepped closer and then turned his head to the side to see if the great druid was still alive. Puale then regained consciousness and noticed Thelb standing before him.
Thelb Karu,
said Puale.
You have survived.
He smiled and then said a woodland prayer in predicate. Thelb could see he was suffering from many wounds, including a fatal piercing of the abdomen. The great druid was losing a lot of blood. He would surely die unless he was healed. The druids had spent nearly all of their healing powers trying to save their wives, daughters, and sisters. Those efforts were for naught, as all the fertile females within the grounds of Tel Suma, the druids, their followers, elves and hominoids, died on that prophesied day. This Zolti massacre, carried out by the Dowiki house of Zistiri, was successful beyond their wildest expectations. Their woodland cousins and the Whispering Wood itself would be without their prophesied restorer, now it seemed.
Arthurham and Usui, still living?
He asked innocently. Thelb looked back with anguished disdain. He shook his head and readied his broadsword.
Did Usui survive?
Puale asked again.
Enough of your prophecy,
Thelb yelled out angrily.
Your mindless devotion to your cultish beliefs have cost me everything. I am a dead grey.
Puale was both highly intelligent and very wise. He understood. Thelb blamed him for this massacre. He was here to exact revenge upon him. The large white wolf then returned to the tower's entrance. Its mouth was covered in the blood of the Drow. The giant wolf limped forward and then transformed back into the wounded druid, Gareth. Gareth was exhausted and bloodied, though pleased to see what he thought was an ally in Thelb.
Thelb Karu, thank the ancients.
Gareth exhaled.
Be silent, druid, or count your days,
Thelb said angrily. Puale waved off Gareth.
I understand, Thelb. I do. You are right. I owe you my life. You owe me more than that. You owe me my life. If they do not burn me, I will run the Darbo to certain death. My life is over. My days are counted, druid. And now, so are yours.
Puale tried to speak, but needed to cover his bleeding belly first.
Then I will offer you more than just my life. I will offer you yours. I will offer you your freedom. That is my right as an elven king.
Puale had been ordained as the woodland elf king more than a century ago. Ancient elvish law afforded foreign elvish kings the power to free elvish slaves and vassals from servitude for acts of heroism in times of war.
I shall proclaim you as a Hades Guran.
That was the term for a freed elvish slave. Thelb was still not satisfied with Puale's promises.
I can also grant you tremendous power, Thelb Karu.
Puale continued to expand his bargain.
The entirety of the Whispering Wood will always be at your beck and call to tell you everything you would ever need to know about anyone or anything.
My king, what is this you speak of? You cannot.
Gareth interrupted.
Last warning, Druid.
Poole had piqued Theb's interest with these offers, but Gareth was right. It made no sense why he would do this. Why offer Thelb the omniscient powers of the Eirdet? He was neither a wood elf nor a druid. Thelb was curious to hear Poole finish.
Why would I ever want that?
Thelb asked callously.
To aid you in combat. To locate your enemies. To manipulate markets. Find people you want found. Help lose those you don't. Why do you offer this to me, Great Druid? I will not spare your life. That much is certain.
Thelb threatened.
And that much has already been offered and agreed upon, Thelb Karu. The moons of the Caerdiola are still in position. Allow me, while there is still time, one last chance to fulfill the prophecy. Afterwards, you may take my life, Thelb Karu, but allow me to pass my Shira.
Thelb was stunned by this offer. Poole's knowledge of Theb's every intimate secret was borne out in that one ask. How could Thelb Karu refuse him that? Poole seized the initiative to close his deal.
My royal coffers shall be open to offer you 500 in river gems, gold, and silver ingots each year. 1,000.
Thelb countered. Poole held his painful, bleeding abdomen, but still managed to smile.
And no one shall ever speak the name Thelb Karu again. He has died here as well.
Thelb insisted.
Done. And you, Cloak, shall use all of your powers to protect this coming restorer. Whatever may come, agree to this, Thelb Karu, and I will proclaim it so as a lawful elvish king. I will give you my life and yours. You shall have your freedom thereafter. Then do what you need to do, Great Druid. Make it so, and I shall agree to your terms.
Thelb said.
And I will see to your death tonight. Otherwise, this agreement is nullified.
He demanded. Poole then conferred with his oldest friend, Gareth. Soon after, they all shared a restorative health potion, among the very last on hand.
Gareth, do as Terrakalin asked. Find a child of the Ostrom. I will remain here with the cloak until I hear your call.
Poole commanded. Gareth obeyed his king, and then restored his wolf form and headed off into the forest farms west of the Ostrapa. Later that evening, Thelb was summoned to the forest to claim the great druid's life in accordance with their pact. When Thelb arrived, he beheld a truly appalling scene. Poole was laying naked on the forest floor. Laying atop a stack of stone slabs above him was the naked body of a young human girl. Poole was expressionless and very near death.
What is this? Who is this human girl?
Thelb demanded. The young human farming serf was naked and crying as she remained bound by the moving vines and tree branches of the ancient Iardet.
She is the answer to our prayers. Within her now is the Restorer,
Gareth said proudly.
His Majesty has achieved the passing of his Shira.
Thelb was expecting to meet some wood-elvish disciple they had dug up from the Believers' Village. At least a willing participant could be found in the shared quest to make this ridiculous prophecy come true. What he never expected to see was what he now beheld. An innocent human farming serf, not even a member of the Believers' Village, bound and defiled. She was not a follower. She was just a victimized human teen girl that was captured specifically for this act.
What have you done?
Asked Thelb of the great druid. Pule did not answer.
It is done. We have found the vessel.
Thelb pushed him back forcefully and closed in on Pule.
You tell me you need to preserve your Shira to satisfy the ancients. And now I see you've reduced yourself to a midgerin.
He yelled at Pule. A midgerin was an elvish slang term used to describe an honorless male who, through lack of self-control, mated with a beast or common farm animal. Pule looked upon Thelb with great shame. He had done what he had done. Theb's patience was now lost. He drew his broadsword.
Say the words. Decree my freedom. Order the support of your informants and the annual payment for my services.
Thelb demanded. Pule obliged. He made his decree exactly as was agreed back at his tower at Tel Suma. The Whispering Wood heard his command. It was made so. After Pule had finished speaking, he lowered his head and prepared himself for death. Gareth then tried to renegotiate with the angry Grey Elf. Thelb was a beat-on tout, he figured, not a killer, but an elf of honor. He could be reasoned with, Gareth presumed. There had to be a way to calm him enough to preserve the life of the great druid. But as soon as Gareth started speaking, Thelb stepped towards Pule. He then spun quickly and beheaded Pule with his broadsword. Gareth was still mid-sentence, trying to reason with Thelb, when his lightning-quick strike was made. Thelb had ended Pule's life and completed their solemn pact. Gareth had begun another rhetorical sentence when he beheld the headless king fall to the forest floor. Thelb had spun to face Gareth.
Great druid!
Screamed Gareth.
Thelb Karu, I shall kill you for what you have done,
he bellowed. The Whispering Wood wailed with him at the loss of the great druid. Thelb could hear them all crying now. He became aware of their omniscient voices. He covered his ears, but it did not help mute the wailing chorus of the Iardet.
Silence, druid. You have already twice betrayed your king's pact. Once for threatening the guardian of your restorer, and twice for speaking my name. To breach this pact again shall mean your life.
Thelb threatened, with his broadsword pointed at the sobbing druid's neck. Gareth ran to the side of his fallen king in great sorrow. As he cried over him, Thelb approached from behind.
Now take this girl back with you to Tel Suma. If her safety should ever be unsure, you may send the king's minions to find me.
He jeered. At first, Gareth did not respond, but then, as he noticed Thelb walking away, he called out to him.
No, you cannot go. You must return her to the human Ostrom village,
Gareth demanded.
I cannot.
What? That was never part of this deal, Druid. There is no way that is going to happen.
You must, to maintain the trust and power of the Whispering Wood. You must respect the ancient texts. That was all part of the deal,
Gareth retorted.
What texts? I know nothing of what you speak. That is your religion, not mine.
Thelb scoffed, preparing his broadsword for one last kill. He then looked over to the innocent human girl.
Why? Why can't you take her back there?
He said, with his sword readied for Gareth's neck.
She shall live among the humans. It was foretold she cannot live in Tel Suma. That is not in keeping with the telling of the seers.
Gareth tried to explain. Theb's patience was worn thin.
The Restorer is within that human girl,
Gareth said, pointing to the young human serf from the Ostrom who was still crying in woodland bondage upon a stone slab altar.
That is what you have promised to protect unto death,
Gareth jeered back. Thelb looked to the helpless human girl and felt guilt for having anything to do with her capture.
Release her then,
said Thelb. Gareth did as Thelb asked, and the vines and tree branches that had animated and bound the young girl slithered away from her body, returning to their normal state. Almost immediately, she sat up and then ran away into the forest.
Human girl, do not run. I will help you,
Thelb said in the language of the Mirdet. Thelb did not know any of the common languages of the West. He could not yet speak to the girl. The young human girl named Gale ran quickly back into the forest, desperate to escape these elvish males who had stolen her innocence. As Thelb followed Gale into the woods, Gareth turned from him. He then took the body of his fallen king back with him to Tel Suma. A pair of avian messengers from the Whispering Wood had reached Nuna. She was praying in a quiet courtyard near the Zet house. The news she received was crushing. Learning of the Zolti massacre was more than an announcement that her life had now become forfeit, but that every aspect of her religious faith and any hope for their kind had been dashed. She sat alone on a stone bench for a while, crying uncontrollably, until one of the Zet house's many servants informed the sovereign of this. Pathram summoned her. She approached his throne with her eyes reddened by sadness.
Oh, great sovereign, I have learned of the most horrific news,
she exclaimed.
What news is this, priestess? Why is it you are aware of something we are not? What has happened?
Pathram asked. Nuna gasped for air. Her tears prevented her from speaking. Then she finally managed to spit out what she needed to tell.
As your Talimdoin, I hereby offer you my life.
She crumbled before him, prostrating herself in a ball. Pathram laughed.
What are you talking about?
While she sobbed before him, thoughts of concern for his son's safety had now entered his mind.
The mayors of Dawiki have infiltrated Tel Suma and killed everyone inside, including your son and his queen-to-be.
Pathram was so shocked by this announcement, he couldn't bring himself to believe it so.
Nonsense,
he retorted.
That cannot be. I have not received any notification from Tel Suma. Who has told you this? Where are you getting this information?
Patharum pressed her in angry disbelief. Just then, the sovereign's 2 gray mages entered his court solemnly. Alongside them were the highest members of the Mages of Health. They had never all appeared suddenly before him like this, unannounced. Something had happened. He could see it in their eyes. Patharum looked down to Nuna, sprawled before him on the ground in tears. Then his own eyes teared up as he looked up to the mage named Gaidept.
"Tell me, this is not so?"
he asked of his mage. As the mages came closer, they looked to each other to determine who would bear this dreadful news that the sovereign had already been told. Patharum stepped down the stairs towards Nuna. He reached towards her head with a trembling right hand and a look of great anger. Then he relented and cried, placing his hand gently upon Nuna's head. He then sat beside her, and she grasped his feet. Then they wept together on those steps for many hours, until the whole of the Mirdet wept with them. The young Fay Herslet tried again to explain Theb's words and signs to the panicked human girl. Fay Herslet was a pixie, and she was mute, though no one who ever saw her sign to them ever suggested they didn't understand what she meant. The human girl seemed to understand as well.
You must return home. Tell her again,
Theb commanded. The Fae then signed this message to the human girl. Gale was no longer crying, but she was shivering as she cowered before Theb in the cold rain. Theb had given her a blanket to cover herself. He had purchased it in a small Ostrom market, the same store in which he found the right ingredients for his sleep potion, the drugs he hoped he did not have to resort to.
I will lead you back to your village, but you must go home,
Theb repeated again. Fay Herslet tried to offer her a gentle smile. Clearly, the shimmering pixie was far less threatening than the grim-faced sword-wielding Grey Elf, and the other Wood Elf males who had chased her down, shape-shifted before her eyes, and assaulted her sexually. But the girl then breathed heavily again, looking at the 2 strange creatures with suspicion. She removed the wet blanket and fled again into the forest with a scream. Theb scoffed at Fay Herslet, who signed, "I don't know why she's running." Theb pursued her again. Once again, Theb recaptured her and dragged her to the ground, screaming. This time, Theb used his sleeping potion. It was a crude formula, so the dosage was heavy. The girl struggled with him and spat the potion back at Theb as he forced it down her throat. But after a while, as the drug's effect took hold, she stopped fighting and crying and fell asleep. Later that evening, Theb wrapped Gale in another dry blanket. He then placed her in a cart that he rode into the center of town. He stopped by the outer doors of the Earl's court. Behind him followed the young girl's herd, who were instructed by the Fae to follow the cart into town. When he reached the entrance to the wooden keep, he placed the sleeping girl beside the wooden palisade, and then rapped hard on the doors to the inner keep. Theb then rode away. Later, he and Fay Herslet watched to see if she was found. Unfortunately, no one answered the door. After waiting a couple of hours, the birdsong of dawn began, and Gale regained consciousness. She awoke to find herself amid her herd in the Ostrom's town square. She saw she was only wearing the blanket that the strange Grey Elf had given to her, so she removed it and attempted to flee the scene naked. The Earl's guardsmen saw her and managed to stop her there. "How could you leave her there like that? What will they do to her?" the angry Fae signed to Theb.
She is back with the humans. My work here is done. Now, I need you to do something for me.
Theb demanded. The tiny Fae did not lose her expression of extreme disappointment. "What is it you want now?" she signed to him.
Bring Lassiter to me,
Thelb said out loud to the flying Fae. She shrugged her tiny shoulders and shook her head.
He is a gray elf. He looks just like me, except he is a wizard, and his name is Lassiter. Do whatever it is you do. Find him.
The Fae then begun signing a question of his whereabouts.
I do not know where he is. Ask your informants. You're supposed to know where everyone is. So go, find me Lassiter, and bring him here.
Thelb demanded. Here, as in under this same tree? Signed Fae Herslet.
Yes, bring him here, to this very spot, and let me know when he is here, so I may greet him. We are old friends, from the Mirdet. We studied together at the Arnimish door. Tell him that. He will understand.
Weeks later, Thelb was summoned to that very spot, under the large tree, just beyond the gates of the Ostrom. He watched as his oldest friend made his way up the forest hill to him, following the lead of the flying pixie Fae Herslet.
Thelb Karu,
Lassiter asked. Fae Herslet immediately started signing to him that he wasn't to refer to his friend by that name anymore.
It is all right, tiny one. Lassiter knows who I am. He may use my name.
The two old friends embraced. Though Lassiter could tell right away, his friend had changed. He had lost all sense of emotional affection, choosing instead to simply grin at Lassiter ever so slightly. After they had spent some time catching up and reminiscing over some chicken stew with long roots, Thelb let Lassiter know why he was summoned here.
I need to relearn all of the lessons of Parabcm,
Thelb told him.
I have not practiced at all in many years.
Of course, my friend. I would be delighted to have you join my school. It's actually not far from here. You could stay with us as you recover your learnings.
Lassiter responded with a smile.
No. You must show me out here, where no one else can see. Also, I must learn teleportation. Parabcm told me my learning was complete when I last felt the time of mating. But he never showed me that magic. I must know it.
Thelb demanded.
I understand. I will show you,
promised his oldest friend. Over the next several years, Thelb was once again practiced in the arcane arts. Like he had before, he displayed his tremendous talent for spellcraft and apothecary. His refound competence as a wizard was then combined with the highly effective martial skills of the Bidon Tout, turning him into a nearly invincible agent. He had become, just as the Archmagi had prophesied, an agent of darkness to be feared. Thelb became known only as the Cloak thereafter. He was rarely seen in public, and if he did make an appearance, it was always brief, and with his gray face mostly hidden under his black elven cloak. In addition to his promised annual earnings from Telsuma, Thelb earned large amounts of money as an assassin and enforcer. He soon led a large criminal gang that evaded the human authorities for many years to come. His legend grew, but only as fable. No one ever claimed they knew the Cloak. Occasionally, the Cloak was called upon by Fae Herslet to take action, to protect the one the Druids called the Restorer. The human girl finally gave birth to the Druid's child after a life-threatening 5-year gestation. Prior to the birth, Thelb was forced to remove Gale from her home and family in the Ostrom because her father wanted to end the pregnancy. Gale was moved to a mill house in the Central Plains under the watch of a miller who owed the Cloak a large debt. Many years passed, and as Gale grew old, her young child, the half-elf girl, was getting bigger. Thelb would visit her from time to time to ensure she was safe and that the miller and his family did not think the Cloak had forgotten about her. On one of these occasions, Thelb watched a forest bunny hopping on the ground. How it reminded him of the little red-headed girl, so innocent, curious, and pure of heart. While he waited in the forest for a good time to see her, he constructed a toy bunny made of sticks. He fashioned the sticks together, lacing them like a basket. After he had completed the bunny, he attached a large stick to it so he could control its movement from behind a large tree. Later, Thelb saw the Havish girl playing in the garden, but she did not notice the bunny. So Thelb asked the Fae to have a butterfly get her attention, which she obliged. The young Havish girl seemed more impressed with the butterfly that the Fae summoned than Theb's toy bunny he had constructed. But when she finally did see it, she played along and then smiled at Thelb. This caused Thelb to smile as well, for the first time in many years. The girl's overprotective mother, the one they used to call Gale of the Ostrom, would never allow the Cloak to make contact with her daughter, the one the Druids would name Aermine. Gale feared the Cloak always, but when she died, the young girl was left without any willing human guardians. That is when Thelb opted to take her in with him. He chose to protect her personally and teach her in the ways of survival, deep underneath the city of Bishop's Gate, just as was prophesied among the humans.
Thanks so much for watching, everyone. If you haven't yet, please subscribe and ring the bell for notifications so you never miss an episode. Be sure to smash that like button and comment below. It helps a lot. If you'd like to help me get this book published, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter. And as always, be sure to share this story with all of your friends on your favorite social media.